Welcome to the Board of Directors. Welcome to the Board of Directors regular meeting, March 26th, 10 a.m. We do have a quorum, and first up on our agenda is the invocation, and I'll ask Director Molina.
Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for a beautiful day, pleasant spring weather. Please provide us with your discernment as we do the important business of the Transportation Authority for this county. Please help us in this time of war to see to it that people can reach some compromise with their differences, and we can avoid this bloodshedding that's occurring now. I ask all this in your name. Amen.
Y'all, please join me in our pledges to the flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. All right. Next up on the agenda, Mr. Christina, do we have any introductions?
No, sir, we do not.
All right. I do have an agenda item for public comment, allows our residents and participants to engage in the process. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, and clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. I do have one request by Liam Gum Wakefield. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and you got the pronunciation right this time.
You know.
No, I appreciate it. Hello, my name is Liam Gum Wakefield, and I live in the city of Denton. I guess here to talk about more of just future things to consider for the ISP. Like, I guess not the ISP anymore after this year, but like just future bus planning and just things to look out for. Because I've been trying lately to be using more public transit, whether it be buses or GoZone, in my daily life. And a lot of the times I'm having to see if I can plan it. I have to plan out whether or not I have the time to take it, whether like how much earlier I have to leave by or wake up, and how much of a buffer do I have to do to get to, like if I have to go to it, if I take public transit to an event, do I have enough time to get back? To go to either enough time to go to another event by public transit or enough time to get home if it's not an area accessible for public transit. And I think that's in large part a lot of the issue. Is like, if we can figure out ways to make it so where people don't have to plan out their day if they need to take public transit, I would think there would be a huge surge of ridership, because people don't really think about, a lot of times people don't think about how they're going to get to a place if they're in their own car. They just sort of go and put in their GPS and go. They don't have to ask, okay, how much earlier do I have to get up that off, like every time they try to take their car. And then I think this goes on to this, and I know, I also know y'all are moving in the right direction when it comes to this, especially with the A-train upgrades and the expanding the bus lines in Denton. But onto that, I also noticed with the, I'm hoping that we can, like with the hours taken from the new bus lines and the GoZone. I don't know the data like on the data in Louisville, Highland Village on the GoZone usage, but I'm hoping that in Louisville and Highland Village that there's enough that you can eventually do, if the ridership's high enough, do what y'all have done in Denton and go like add a bus line and do the quarterly, because like I was sort of really surprised by the difference in the amount of service hours required for the Denton, besides the Ropes and Ranch one, but the Denton difference in the service hours for the Denton expansions to the GoZone versus the ones in Louisville and Highland Village. And I'm the more I view any person being able to take public transit, whether or not it's by choice or it's the only option they have, is a win in my book. So I'm just, again, hoping to move the most amount of people for the least amount of cost, as Boardman TJ Gilmore says. I yield my time.
Thank you, sir. Okay. That's all I have for public comment. We'll go ahead and move on to consent agenda. If there are no questions, I have no request to pull any items from the consent agenda. If there are no questions or comments on the consent, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next up, regular agenda, item 1. Looks like we're gonna open 1 through 3. Is that correct,
Yes,
Paul?
sir.
All right, so item 1 is discuss and consider approval of a resolution approving budget revision 2026-05 in the amount of 1.882285 of revenue and 1.202210 million of expenses for City of Frisco Transit Services through September 30th, 2026. Number 2, discuss and consider authorizing the chief executive officer to execute a Fourth Amendment and restated interlocal agreement with the City of Frisco for transit services for an amount not to exceed $15,035,831 for a period of 3 years beginning May 1st, 2026 through March 31st, 2029, with the option for up to one additional 2-year term. And 3, discuss and consider approval of an amendment to the master services agreement with River North Transit LLC DBA via transportation for GO Zone demand response service to increase the total contract authorization and issuance of task order number 2 for Frisco Transit Services for a period of 5 months beginning May 1st through September 30th, 2026, and an amount not to exceed 1.173195 million. These 3 items will be presented by Mr. Paul Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. And our recommendations on this next slide go along with the agenda items that you just read. We're taking these all together because they are all related to the board's approval to launch the Frisco GO Zone service that we've been in discussion with for some time. I was looking back at my files in preparation for this conversation. It was the middle of 2023 when the idea was first really launched and was studied between the city of Frisco and its stakeholders and via our partner on the GO Zone service. And we were fortunate enough to have a seat at the table. And here we are about 3 years later with an opportunity. And along that road, this board and staff worked together to figure out what does it look like to do services on a contract basis at this kind of a scale? Why does DCTA do those things? And that led to a discussion that began in October of 2024 about a new member and contracted services policy where you all identified objectives that you would try to achieve if we were to take on contracted services of scale and really contracted services of any kind moving forward. And you said the things that were important were that you want to generate fees that provide incremental revenue that offset member city investment, that those non-members would pay a premium for their contracted service, and they would be for a specific time frame because we're not in the business of doing contract services in perpetuity. Contracted services encourage new members to join DCTA and expand the service area, and that DCTA's position as a regional leader in providing public transportation solutions. And so the good news is that the opportunity we have before you today, we believe checks all of those boxes, and therefore we're asking for your approval. These are excerpts just by way of reminder of the actual policy that you all adopted more than a year ago now, that we're trying to find avenues for people to become members of DCTA and expand the agency service area, because as an entity that serves local member cities, but is also regionally minded, we're trying to help the Mobility 2050 vision of the region to provide interconnectivity across where people need and want to go. In these contracted services, we want to limit the service to not less than 3 and not more than 5 years. There's regular dialogue ongoing throughout the process to figure out what does the future for this particular city look like, and that by the end of that 3rd year, the city and DCTA begin to think about a long-term arrangement, either through a membership structure or a contracted services arrangement, really to provide the ultimate flexibility for cities that are not part of the DCTA system to provide the optionality they're looking for, but also the service that they're looking for. This is What you all provided with this policy is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it really allows DCTA to provide an à la carte menu of services and give cities that don't participate in transit the most options they possibly can, while also looking after the best interests of our member cities. And in doing so, that's what helps us lead in the regional conversation. So this slide contains an overview of what the Frisco service will look like. I'll start with the graphic to the left, and it shows you the service area. Initially, there's a boundary set up in blue, and it's centered really by the Dallas North Tollway and the main commercial corridor in the city of Frisco. Out to the west, we have the area of Frisco Lakes. That's a really high demand area for the current demand response service that we operate out there. The budget allows for up to 20 vehicles operating on a 12-hour service day, 261 weekdays a year, and that totals about 62,640 hours. This is a not to exceed contract, and so that is the service hour budget that would be deployed. Those are how the service hours would be billed. And we expect that as we launch in this initial boundary, we're going to learn things about the service with our partners from VIA and the city of Frisco that are going to allow us to make adjustments in the future. Perhaps to hours of service that today are running from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., perhaps to a different boundary or area of coverage in the city of Frisco. What you see in this exhibit outside of the solid blue is a dotted purple line. That's an alternative boundary. This was part of the original boundary that was studied by VIA and Frisco and DCTA. And what we intend is that once the service launches and hits a stasis point, we understand demand, then that's the first place of expansion. We are talking with the city of Frisco staff already about where are the places that you might want to go next if the budget will allow, because we're trying to be flexible and provide as many options as we can and capture the most ridership that we can. So we expect this to evolve over time, but not outside of this not to exceed budget that you're going to see there. In terms of what we're covering, in the initial boundary, we're covering about 30% of the population, about 30% of the land area. That alternative boundary ticks those things up to about 40%. And the city estimates that about 75% of all their jobs are within that initial boundary, that blue area. We also connect to the DART Northwest Plano Park and Ride. This is the end of the line for an express or a regional bus service that moves north and south. That would allow people to arrive at Northwest Plano Park and Ride and move into the zone.
Is that the purple dot, right? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
That's what
it
I
is.
thought.
We are in good conversation with Dallas Area Rapid Transit about getting a license agreement between DART and DCTA to operate this. We don't expect any obstacles to receiving that license at no cost according to their current policies. The fare structure for the service is shown at the right, and this was a fare structure that was requested by the city of Frisco and reviewed by VIA and DCTA. A $3 base fare for up to 1.5 miles, and then depending on trip distance, additional fee is available or added up to moving beyond 6 miles, and it's capped at a $5 maximum. Trips to and from the Northwest Plano Park and Ride would be capped at $3. We expect discount programs similar to the DCTA service, like for senior citizens and those sorts of things. We're trying to make it as consistent as we can with our current fare structure. And then as we think about our fare policy, which Derek will brief in a minute, we will be talking about how does our fare policy encapsulate and then capture all of the different fares that we have out there to make it as seamless and easy to use as possible. One unique feature of this service that the staff at Frisco has thought about and that we offered the opportunity to engage in is a cashless system. So today you can pay a cash fare on GoZone by paying your cash to the driver. And on this service, we are working through the machinations of what it would look like to be cashless. That is, you can only pay on the app, or you can only pay through a prepaid voucher with a code in the app, similar to some of the passes that we have available on ours as well. As we've talked over time about future fare policies at DCTA, the desire to minimize cash has been something that this board has expressed interest in. And so this gives us a good opportunity to see how that works in real time and learn things and bring those learnings to the betterment of the DCTA service and the other contracts that we offer. The initial term of the agreement would be 3 years with a single 2-year renewal option. We're intending to start the service in May of 2026, likely early May, perhaps May 5th. And then we've already talked about how the budget enables a lot of flexibility on the service area. This is the cost model for the Go Zone and demand response service. So the previous elderly disabled paratransit service that we're providing will continue. We have two different contract operators currently. Z-Trip is providing the elderly disabled demand response service. VIA would be providing the Go Zone service. But we are having conversations about how do we make sure that we've got service equity across the entire city with regard to wheelchair accessible vehicles, and what's the most efficient way to make sure we're delivering all the service we need to across the area. So what you see in this model is the direct cost of the Go Zone service and the direct cost of the demand response service. And then the total administrative cost line is really the summation of lines C through F that are shaded out in gray. Yes, sir.
So are we changing anything with the demand response, or are we just putting it in here just
We're just
for visual?
We're putting it in, we're changing nothing about the demand response arrangement. We're just putting it into the one single interlocal agreement.
Okay, got it.
And the interlocal agreement says that we have the ability in the future to think about how that demand response service is delivered, and that we won't be precluded from merging these services in the future if we wanted to. Again, just for efficiency and to get the most bang for the buck, all that sort of stuff. So items C through F, you see the specific line items of costs that are related to, more directly related to what's in the new member and contracted services policy. There's a non-member fee line that persists throughout. There's the indirect cost of service that is pure administrative cost. The incremental staff and resources is available to either put towards the wages, salaries, and benefits of people that are working on the project, or if we needed to bring on additional staff, we're able to do that with that budget. And then the demand response admin fee is just this, again, the straight 60% charge that's currently in the contract. And actually it brings it down because that fee is a little bit higher under the standalone, but under the umbrella of this one, it's all together, but still within the constraints of our policy. So there you see over the course of the bottom, total administrative costs per year, what that breaks out to in terms of a percentage, so that we can make sure that we're in alignment with board policy. And the summation of those first 3 years is the $15 million not to exceed. In the items that we're asking you to approve, we're asking you to approve a task order with VIA to get us through the end of the fiscal year. And then that would allow us to maintain our contract with VIA, issuing task orders on a fiscal year basis. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, our recommendations again align with the 3 board items that were presented at the beginning, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Board, questions, comments, concerns?
I've got one question, Mr. Chair. Paul, do you know how the city of Frisco is paying for this? Is this through some funding through COG? Or is it?
They are receiving a federal share of funds from COG, and they are paying for local dollars as well.
Do we know the breakdown?
It's about, I think the bucket, there's several different buckets of federal money. It's fairly complex. It's about 25%, 75% local federal.
Okay.
In the first 3 years.
I'd love to see how that stack is created, just because that may be an option for us to leverage that in other cities if
Yes.
we can figure it out.
They do have programmed dollars through the COG already in the transportation improvement program for year 1. There is unprogrammed, as I understand it, unprogrammed dollars that are available for year 2. The funding picture federally for year 3 is not known at this time. And the contract that we had, the interlocal agreement says that everybody recognizes that, and the city of Frisco is able to fill the gap if they need to.
Yeah, no, that based on what I've seen, they put some skin in the game. So that's good to hear.
Paul, what do you think is a official start date for initial boundary?
We're targeting May 5th.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, and I think I know the answer, I just want to make sure everyone listening understands. This is a standalone Go Zone zone area,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So this will not connect to the Louisville Highland Village zone or the Denton zone.
That's correct. It connects to the Northwest Plano Park and Ride as its connectivity to the regional network.
Okay, but as we go forward and we get out into, past year 3 or possibly 5. And we're looking at, bringing them in as a member city, we would connect that to the rest of the network.
Yeah. Great question. So I'll point back here. This is what we're aiming for in the policy, that we've begin formulating a long-term arrangement, initiate an application process to membership, or the service comes to an end. That is the way that meets their need for flexibility and to understand what general public transportation service looks like. It's the best way for us to make sure that our interests are protected and that we're not doing this forever. But it will be incumbent upon us and the city of Frisco to really engage in that dialogue, say what is coming next and what are you hearing from your residents and the general public about their interest.
Okay, and one more question. So as far as the marketing itself goes for the service, is that something that DCTA is doing or the city or a little bit of both?
So the city's marketing and communications department is taking the lead in terms of the creative and all that sort of stuff. They've got their own brand guidelines that have to be followed. VIA is bringing their marketing and communications resources to bear significantly during service launch. And then we're really in a position of echoing and boosting those messages through our channels. Yes, ma'am.
Question,
Go ahead.
will the same Go Zone app that we have work in their zone?
I had the same exact question the other day, and yes, it will. So when you open the Go Zone app, you will see the Denton zone, the Louisville Highland Village zone, and the Frisco zone lit up on your phone.
Great presentation, Paul. How much of that blue zone is in actually Denton County versus in percentage wise? Is it
Good.
20%, 30%?
You know, I don't know I don't know exactly where the Denton County boundary falls on this. I'd have to get back to you on that. I know the western part of the city of Frisco covered.
It's 423.
Yeah, so
uh,
it's
The west side of 423.
West side of Highway 423. Okay. I can bring that back.
west of.
Yeah, so it's looking at the map, knowing that 423 is where you on the map where it says the colony, the road that goes north and south, that's 423. So it's not a very significant portion that's in Denton County.
10%.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? I want to thank staff for all the work. I want to thank the city of Frisco, of course, for them looking out for their residents and trying to find ways to deal with the tremendous amounts of growth that we're dealing with in North Texas. I've always believed that in North Texas, we are in all of the above, whether that's energy, whether that's infrastructure. We need to be looking at every single tool because that's the only way we're going to be able to manage the growth that we're experiencing for the next 25 years. So thank you for that. If there are no other questions.
I mean, if I could just echo that, we've had a great working relationship with the city of Frisco staff. The team at VIA has been great to bring this together. Our board member from Frisco, Mr. Franklin, has been working a lot above the water line and below the water line to communicate to the right folks. And so we're grateful for his.
So now, once we approve this will go to Frisco City Council.
So this would be teed up for Frisco City Council approval in early April.
Okay.
And so it would be, the service launch is contingent upon that final approval.
Understood. Any other comments before I open this to a motion? All right, we need all three of those if anybody would like to make a motion.
Have to make them one at a time.
We can do that.
Which one is it? Okay.
RAO1.
RA1. Yeah, make a motion to approve resolution approving budget revisions. 2026-05 in the amount of 1,882,285 of revenue and 1,202,210 of expenses for the city of Frisco Transit Services through September 30th, 2026.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, I'll continue, make a motion to authorize the chief executive officer to execute the Fourth Amendment and restated interlocal agreement with the city of Frisco for transit services for an amount not to exceed $15,035,831 for a period of 3 years, beginning on May 1st, 2026 through March 31st, 2029, with the option for up to one additional 2-year term.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed? Motion passes.
make a motion that the board approve an amendment for the master services agreement with River North Transit LLC, doing business as Via Transportation for Go Zone Demand Response Services, to increase the total contract authorization and issuance of task order number 2 for Frisco Transit Services for a period of 5 months, beginning on May 1st, 2026 through September 30th, 2026, in the amount not to exceed $1,173,195.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Great work, guys.
Good.
All right, item 4. Discuss update on intermediate service plan phase number 3. And I have Karina Maldonado, our planning manager.
Morning.
Good morning.
Members of the board. Today I'll be presenting another update on the intermediate service plan phase 3. We will kind of go into an overview, and again, this is a discussion item, no action required today. Go over some of the items we talked about last time, but then go further into the cost of the bus scenario and Go Zone options. And then at the end, request some feedback at the end of what we presented. So going over a recap of the bus scenarios provided with our strive to demonstrate cost effectiveness in our network and present a year-round service. Looking at the scenarios provided, really our few options that DCTA has more control over to move forward are those 2 scenarios highlighted on the screen, which is scenario 2, which reflects the Connect 367 network plus an additional route 2 and 4, as well as a potential option for scenario 4, which again has Connect 367, Connect 2 and 4, as well as a modified Colorado Express option. Scenario 4 remains a potential option, but is dependent upon UNT conversations and cost participation to serve both of our entities' interests. So with that in mind, as we consider scenario 2 on the basis of cost and benefits, we see that the cost per passenger shifts to the left slightly when we start applying the most recent cost of service totals for fiscal year 25 against bus and Go Zone. However, it is important to note that the average passengers per hour driving this cost curve is based on conservative estimates of ridership using the existing Connect services and Go Zone capture as a basis. Other factors such as transfer points within these routes and increased development for transit supportive uses like commercial, moderate to high density residential will shift these average passenger per hour points to the right, bringing the overall scenario to a bus favorable standpoint. Shifting focus now to the operational cost for scenario 2, based on implementation in early to mid-July of this year, the cost is approximately $2.6 million in fiscal year 27 to add 2 routes at a 20-minute frequency between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. on weekdays, and a 40 to 45-minute frequency between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekends. This is consistent with our Connect network service standards to have a more consistent network within the core of the Connect. This also reflects Go Zone savings from what we saw before with our Go Zone capture. That savings hours translates to about 200 to 800,000 based on a 29% capture. And we see that the overall operational cost drops when you remove that savings down to 1.8 million. These cost estimates are again based on the fiscal year 25 cost of service totals. You can also see that the capital costs associated with the scenario include improvements to existing and new stops, as well as temporary facilities for operating these routes without a layover point at the DDTC. So going into the GO zone redeployment options, based on scenario 2, hours saved. These were also options presented at the previous board meeting, so I won't go into too much detail on them. But this includes the potential GO zone boundary expansions into Denton, in Northeast Denton, as well as west of I-35. The creation of a special district in Flower Mound restricted to Highland Village and Louisville residents, as well as additional hours towards KPI adjustments in the Highland Village and Louisville zones to achieve a consistent 20-minute wait time and 6% seat unavailability. So based on scenario 2, the average of 15,000 hours saved translates to just under 800,000 in dollar savings. The average hours required to redeploy these GO zone service for options A through C totals 21,630 hours, which then translates to a cost of 1.15 million, or a net cost of just under 353,000. Adding the contingency for option D, which is the Louisville Highland Village KPIs, would bring the net cost of service to 652,650. To summarize the scenario 2 service hour savings does not enable all GO zone alternatives without additional budget. This calculation, again, does not include the use of any contract holdback hours in our existing contract with VIA. Additional options for the Flower Mound extension from Highland Village and Louisville are also included in this presentation today. What you see as a difference in both options is an alternate boundary that extends to west of FM 2499 to capture additional medical facilities, including some key pharmacies as other medical uses. Alternate A on the left reflects an unrestricted zone for trips originating in Highland Village and Louisville, but reflects a high service hour requirement based on increased trip lengths. So what we talked about last time was going for the furthest edge of maybe Highland Village and Louisville into this extended area in Flower Mound would increase the hours needed. Going to alternate B using the same revised boundary, it limits trips to medical facilities, schools, and churches only. So more tailored to the specific needs of those areas. But it would require additional administrative work to develop, maintain, and inform customers of eligible destinations within the boundary should things like tenants change, locations change. So that would require more staff time to make sure that we're communicating that to the public and then keeping that list internally.
Can I offer some context for listeners and viewers out in the world? So this alternative B, there was a council member in Highland Village brought up the point that that under alternative A, we would be creating an opportunity for Louisville and Highland Village residents to go to Target in Flower Mound, for example, and spend their sales tax dollars outside of our city. So she wanted to ensure that we're protecting our sales tax base, and by eliminating a lot of the retail in what you see in alternative B. So it's a kind of a compromise to allow GO zone transit into this area for medical, church, school functions like that, while also protecting sales tax revenue in the two partner cities.
Is there a preference from the city on either one of these alternatives?
Formally, there has not been one, but I do believe as Dan had mentioned, I think it probably would be more favorable to go to the medical, school, hospital areas as opposed to making it so broad that it could go elsewhere.
Historically, I'm a fan of starting small and expanding if needed. If you start large and try to bring it back down, you're taking away. So that would be my input on A versus B.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may. I think that's exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for by bringing these alternatives to you all. I would highlight that there are some edge cases in this alternative B. For instance, Target has a pharmacist and an optometrist. I'm sure there are other facilities in this zone that have some dual use purpose that I expect the customer service phone to ring on day 2 saying, why won't the app let me go to this place? So as long as we all understand that that is the level of administration and that's going to be required to execute that, then we can proceed in that direction. But there's a lot of nuance when we start carving it up that way that we're going to learn as we go if that's the choice that you all want to make.
Thank you, Paul.
Right, so I just want to clarify that I'm understanding what's being presented correctly. So with scenario 2, there's an additional, so I'm just going to look at fiscal year 27 because that's for a full year. On an annual basis, adding the 2 connect routes, and then giving a credit for the go zone capacity that offsets, that's an additional 1.8 million in costs for us. And then if we decide to do options A through D, that's an additional 652,000 every year.
That is correct. It's important to note you don't have to select options A through D. You can pick from the menu, which would reduce that overall burden. And then also, as we pointed out, when you all approved phase 1, you gave us this budget that totaled about 16,000 hours of additional service in case KPIs got wonky.
Right.
We still have not executed on those hours. They're still out there. And so those would also bring favorability if we chose to take some of those off the table. And so we're kind of painting with a broad brush at this point, but the way that you just framed it is exactly correct. And that is about, on a $50 million a year operating budget, about a 5% operating cost increase for pure transit services on the road.
Okay. So switching our focus to scenario 4, using the updated fiscal year 2025 cost of service totals, the most conservative passenger per hour estimates continue to show key peak hours of the day as bus favorable and could further shift to the right as well based on development trends and transit generating uses. And again, this scenario includes routes 3, 6, 7, the additional 2 and 4, plus a modified Colorado Express, which increases our go zone capture up to 54%. Scenario 4 also presents an opportunity for a cost sharing or cost participation based on the modified route serving more off-campus housing, which are the dots shown in blue, specific to UNT, than the previous route, which is shown on the left-hand side. It also provides other key destinations or serves other key destinations for the general public, such as the Golden Triangle Mall, the VA services, so additional services that other folks outside of the UNT network would like to access. Furthermore, the route would no longer be limited to the university hours and frequencies of 7 to 8 p.m. at a 20-minute and 40-minute frequency, dependent on the time of day, or to the schedule for the UNT calendar and any scheduled breaks. On the right, the proposed modified route would follow the Connect service standards of 7 to 9 p.m. on weekdays. It will follow the weekend schedule of 45-minute frequencies, 20-minute on a weekend or weekday, and would be a year-round service. So similar to scenario 2, the cost is approximately 2.6 million in fiscal year 27 to add routes 2 and 4 following Connect standards. The full cost of year-round modified Colorado Express is 1.3 million, and the savings from the 59% go zone capture translates to 1.7 million for a net cost of 2.2 million. Now, putting the cost participation into this from UNT for hours already served as part of their contract would reduce the cost by approximately 1 million, reducing the net cost to 1.2 for this scenario. Similar to scenario 2, capital costs include improvements to existing and new stops, as well as temporary facilities for operators running these routes without a layover point at the DDTC. And then jumping into the GO zone redeployment, based on scenario 4, the average of 32,700 hours saved translates to just 1.7 million in dollar savings. The average hours required, similar to as shown in scenario 2, is 21,630, which translates to a cost of 1.15 million, or a net savings of just under 589,000. Adding the contingency of option D would bring the net savings of service to 289,000. So to summarize this GO zone deployment scenario 4 service hours savings result in operating savings and no additional budget to implement GO zone redeployment. And again, this calculation does not include the 16,000 hours as part of the contract holdback with VIA. Looking at the stop improvements, and this would cover both scenarios 2 and 4, to implement scenario 2, 30 existing stops not in service today would be reactivated for route 2 and 4, and 25 stops are being added for increased access to the network as new or modified stops to increase access to the core commercial and institutional areas. Should we include a modified Colorado Express as part of scenario 4, that would be an additional 11 stops in service today, while an additional 14 stops would be created or modified to serve the adjusted route. All stops added to the network would include a pole and sign as well as an ADA landing pad. Amenities would not be explored at this time, but would be explored in future projects tied to our bus stop design guidelines project. So as we finalize this phase, here are the upcoming decisions for the board to consider and where we would like to seek your feedback. There is the scenario 2 versus scenario 4 option, as well as a status quo option, should the board decide to not move forward with 2 or 4. There's also, depending on scenarios 2 and 4, the GO zone redeployment options of A, B, C, or D, which again, to Paul's point earlier, does not have to be described as it was on the previous slides. It could be an a la carte option as determined by the board. If the scenario or option C for GO zone is selected, there would be again the determination of an alternate 1 or 2. And I think what I heard earlier was a preference for an option 2. So with that, the upcoming timeline or key timelines to milestones to keep in mind are a final recommendation to the board in April in our next meeting, and then a later update on the implementation of the service in late August. Within that time, once a determination is made or a recommendation for approval is made, staff will begin the scheduling and run cutting process for the scenario identified, as well as the bus stop implementation phase, including permitting and installation. On the back end, staff will continue to work with VIA for the GO zone redistribution based on what is approved, as well as increased outreach to internally with our operators, as well as externally to the public to make them aware of changes that are upcoming. And again, this is a discussion item. I'd be happy to take any additional questions and happy to hear any feedback that you have.
Board, questions, comments, concerns, suggestions?
I have comments. So I just wanted to say for a minute that people just kind of talk through what my thought process is. I'll start with scenario 2. When I look at the curve for scenario 2, it looks like where we are right now. We're looking at the dash line curve, which would be, what we've got with the proposed scenario and capturing the GO zone rides onto the bus. It looks like, for the late night, AM, even the mid-go Even at midday right there, we're still in a more no zone favorable cost category. And we have our PM peak, which is just below that line. I mean, there's a dollar difference in the cost per service hour. So maybe just thinking about this in a way that I'm thinking, you know, if I have $100, how do I move the most people as cost efficiently as possible? I'm thinking that we might be a little bit early on a scenario 2 implementation, just because we do have, you know, at least a few data points that are significantly above that orange line there. So it seems like, you know, when we look at the next slide and the additional cost, that additional cost is high. And I think that it's because we're moving people in the more costly. Now, maybe our ridership goes up if we do that, but it's kind of a gamble, you know. So I feel like maybe it's a little bit early. Not that we won't get there for scenario 2. I would like for some of those things to slide right before we pull the trigger on an additional $1.8 million a year in costs. That's my personal opinion. On scenario 4, things are a lot further to the right. So it looks, you know, there is a data point. There's one above the line. There's one that's just right on the line. This looks like, to me, this is much more ready for us to do something with this scenario. However, this scenario is a big chunk. This is a big investment. And so, you know, as much as it's still kind of on the line, you know, can we continue to service, you know, the current service that we have with Go Zone and just leave it the way it is and be okay? Yes, I think so. But if we can move this, I think we can move more people. But I would really love to see what UNT is willing to do to help us make that happen.
Thank you for that. And as you're talking, the thing that first comes to our mind is, isn't it great that we can have this kind of policy discussion? Isn't it great that we've got the ability to look at where the dollars and cents land and say, what is the right mode? So kudos to the team and this is operations, this is finance, this is planning. You don't get to this level of service hours and cost per hour unless you've got the whole group working. And so I'm glad that we can have the conversation. A couple of points that I would make. So far last year on the Connect ridership, we saw a significant increase. We think that's because the people that were taking Go Zone made the transition to the bus. And we also think it's because of the consistent availability on a 20-minute frequency, more people were compelled to use transit. So far this year, our Connect service is still up 12% year over year. And so you could look at the dots on scenario 2 and add 12% to them and see that they've already shifted just a little bit to the right, making it slightly more favorable. Your point on this one is well taken. This is a big step to take without a partner. And that's why we frame it up this way. These conversations with UNT are happening in parallel with this. And the clock is ticking because we have to start service planning for the fall of 2026 in the next several weeks. And so that is important to state. The last thing that I'll say is to repeat what you said. It is somewhat of a risk, and the curves were falling in about the exact same place when we took the risk on step 1. You all were looking at half the day was bus favorable, half the day was Go Zone favorable, and we said, what might happen if we make this step? Now, the OpEx difference on that was about $600,000, not near as big as it is here. So I think you're seeing the space rightly. My input is UNT participation is really important for scenario 4 because it is such a big investment. The curve has already shifted a little bit to the right, though not enough to make all 4 of the dots go to the right side of the curve. So thank you for, that's right.
How are the conversations with UNT going?
You know, I think we've got a great lines of communication with our partners over there. They've been really forthright and open-minded about alternatives. I think if you've read the headlines, you know, I don't know, I know the details that are in the paper, which I'm sure there's more nuance to, but they're looking for relief and budget things. And so transportation is an expense. And so what we've been able to do is work with them to consolidate the number of routes overall that we've been running. I think when we started here 3-4 years ago, we were doing 17 UNT routes. Now we're doing 9 this semester. And there's a scenario that says maybe DCTA is providing 4 or 5 and they're providing a few others. And so that's part of the equation. How do we reduce service costs by making it as efficient as possible on our side? The revenue conversation and what is the cost per service hour really is getting started in earnest right now, because we have the clarity of our costs from last year, and they also have the clarity of costs from the market survey that they did. And so I expect in April, when we'll be able to bring this conversation back and be able to bring you back here's where we stand on the UNT discussion, so that you can see more holistically how that piece fits into this.
Paul, if I could, going back to the conversation about UNT, one of the things that we consider with the modified Colorado Express route is that it is also another further consolidation of their existing UNT routes. So by being able to consolidate it just a tad, we're actually consolidating about 3 routes with this version to still pick up the off-campus students and bring them into the UNT area.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas today, south of campus, there's 5 or 6 routes running. This route that serves the DCTA core network plus 2 other routes that might be UNT specific routes could do the job of those 5 or 6 routes. And that, again, our service planning team and their transportation team have been working really closely on that. And they seem to be open-minded to those kinds of opportunities.
Karina, can you go back to bus stop infrastructure scenario 4 and kind of talk on maybe the data sets that really led to the increase of 15 new modified stops on Route 2 on Mayhill?
Yes, so there's a lot of pre-existing stops from previous service prior to COVID. So the previous Route 2, or this is obviously not the same iteration of it, operated on State Loop 288, but did not operate on Mayhill. So everything along that roadway would be a new stop that's necessary. There are, I would say between the time of the previous route and now, there's been some significant development. There's also the actual construction of Mayhill Road, which was completed around that time frame. So you have increased multifamily. I think probably Graystar development is one of the largest ones, if we can remember back to the previous presentations with all those development points. So to be able to kind of pick up that area, we would have to go south on Mayhill to safely pick up. So that's the reason for all the new stops on Route 2. Hopefully that explained it well.
Can the Denton folks talk to me a little bit about the expansions A and B for Denton? Maybe we can go back to that map. There we go. That was it. So I'm familiar with B because I've been speaking with United Way of Denton County, and there's a lot of job activation that we believe that this would help support. And I don't personally have any issue with that. I think that there's some way that we can do that. Maybe it's this full number, maybe it's a modified number. I don't know, but I think if we were going to pick up a part of Denton that would serve and be valuable, I think that one is right there. I don't know much about A. Can anybody tell me a little bit about what that's trying to do?
I can. So it's picking up, it's labeled Hodge because that's Hodge Elementary, but you've got a really large, development, single family and multifamily in that area that's outside Loop 288 that has now happened. And having lived off of Kings Row, which is just to the east of Loop 288, right there, I mean, it's really congested. So there's just a lot of intense development in that area because it is so close to Loop 288 and then out Sherman Drive for FM 1428. That's probably the natural extent of it for some period of time because you're starting to run into the creek and that's going to limit that. So,
Okay.
and then also you have C.H. Collins and the LaGrone Academy, which is just to the west. And that's now become a full 4-year high school.
Okay. Okay, super. That helps at least give me some context because I could see where we may not this board might not take a bite at the whole apple for expansion, but we might look to prioritize one or the other, and then look to maybe do that in a future year. Again, this board has complete control over which of these A, B, C, and D we look at, right? I'd like to point out, I think what's important on 4 is that's 20 minutes and extended to 9 o'clock. That is going to be a great route for the city. Residents, students, everybody. It's a huge connector. It gives us one of those east-west spines that we need. I would hope that the university would, it is a partnership. And I think I've been very, very pleased that the university has been leaning on our expertise and allowing us to figure out how we can move more people more cost effectively. And I'm really proud of our team that we've been able to figure out ways to do that. Whereas when I was here back in the 19, it was kind of, we just think something should go there. And as you can see there, 17 routes, multiple routes that crossed over each other, just not nearly as efficient as it has become with the team. But I really would hope that the university, after seeing the state of the market, after understanding, the push and pull, would understand that, they're becoming much less of a commuter school with all of the multifamily and opportunities for students to live within the city. So I would hope that their paradigm of supporting those students is a little bit more in line with being able to be considered a year-round school, as well as the network that creates. It's going to draw students that come. I get overseas as a challenge right now, but students that come, to not have the cost burden of a vehicle, and be able to use a network like this and have that level of reliability, I think is outstanding. So I'm hopeful that UNT will understand that after having the opportunity to go look and see what the market provides. Because I don't believe that the pricing that we're providing them is still not a great deal. I think as I've looked at those numbers, what we're providing to them as a partnership is still an amazing deal based on the market research that they went out and did earlier this year. Any other comments or questions for staff or any direction you might want to give them before they start working through next steps on this? I do hope. I think number 4 is really the best option that we have here. I have concerns with option 2 as well, but we're gonna need some help with getting this one over. So, go talk to your UNT friends.
Yeah, you and me here. The state school.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that I always lived with or in the dorms or associated with, all of us have got. But hey, that's money to pay stay at school. So we were on the lower income scale to start with by going to the state school. As far as that was our choice. But all of us worked. And when you start looking at some of this, is the development that you're talking about, is that going to play into UNT's demographic? No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else? I think we're good on item 4. We'll go ahead and move on to item 5. Yeah, thank you very much. Item 5 is discuss an update on our fair policy development, and this is Mr. Derek Sibley, our VP of Finance. And again, this is a discussion item, so there's no decision to be made here, but input is requested.
Absolutely. Good morning. We are heading into trying to develop get a fair policy put on together, and we want to provide you guys an update on where we are in that process. We started with really doing an analysis of our current fair policy or current fair structure, what kind of fares we have, the payments, payment systems, all the different things to kind of get a good idea, understanding of the fares that we currently have in order to build from there. And so this morning, I want to kind of walk you through 4 different things that we're looking at. One is how we built the analysis. What did we do in order to come up with the analysis? 2 is, what does the fare box recovery data actually look like? What the fare box recovery data actually looks like based off of the analysis that we did. What are fare products we currently have that we are running, and then what our proposed framework would look like for our upcoming fare policy. And then at the end, I would like to just gauge the board on what their priorities are as far as what they would like to see as we move forward into drafting the fare policy. So kind of let me start with the methodology that we used for the development of this analysis. First of all, we pulled all the fare data from what I'm calling our 6 payment systems, which are really DDTC, our GoPass app, Shopify, our ticket vending machines, and then Via. Pulled that information for fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, and then through December of fiscal year 26, and then organize it all by month. And so we know what fares we are selling, or which ones are being purchased, and we know what fares and where they're being paid for at. The second step on that was to allocate those by mode. So our rail, our bus, access, and then go zone. So then we know how those fares are being used. And then step 3 is create, we have a pooled revenue. So when someone purchases a fare at DDTC and on the GoPass app, we currently don't have a means of knowing where they use that fare. So they could use it on the rail, they could use it on the bus, and we currently do not have a method in which to determine how that was done when they purchased that. And so we have the purchase record, we know they bought it, but we don't know how they used it. And so what we had to do is we have what we refer to as pooled revenue, and we allocated those pooled revenues based off of ridership for each month, based on the ridership on the bus and on the rail. And just for an example, if 50% of our ridership was on the rail and 50% of it was on bus, then 50% of that pooled revenue went to rail, 50% of it went to bus. And now, obviously, those are not the actual numbers, but just to kind of give you an idea of what we did with those pooled revenues. And this is really the same process that we use with our NTD, our federal reporting that we have to do when we have to allocate things. We base it off of ridership. And so it's really a consistent, defensible type of method in allocating those. And then in step 4, we actually divided those fares that we collected by the cost of service for each one of those modes. And what that does is it gives us our fare box recovery rates that we're going to look at on the next slide. And so the cost per service that we used aligns with the numbers that we used in our cost allocation worksheets that we had been producing. And so moving forward on the fare box recovery, fare box recovery is what I just explained, is the fares collected divided by the cost of the service. And so basically our agency total for fiscal year 2025 was 4.2%. And what that basically means is that about 4 cents out is recovered for every dollar that we spend in that service. And so understanding where we're at and looking at each of the individual modes over to the right-hand side, you have our rail was at 1.9%. Rail, as you know, is a very expensive service to run with relatively low fares. So a fare box recovery in that area is not necessarily unexpected. Our bus was at 3.8%. Access is at 1.2%, and then Go Zone is our strongest service, or is at 8.7% overall. And so these numbers kind of will serve as our baseline as we move into developing our fare policy. And you're probably wondering, you know, how does this compare to other agencies? How does this compare to the industry as a whole? And overall, when you look at small urban or small rural, suburban multimodal agencies in the NDT reporting, you're going to look at anywhere from 2 to 8% as an agency as a whole. And so when you look at us as an agency as a whole, we're sitting at about 4.2. You kind of feel like, okay, we're sitting in the middle of that range is where we would be or where we should be. Now, if you look at it industry wide and you look at all agencies, all modes, and you're talking about, you know, the big agencies that are dominated by high density rail systems, you know, New York City, Chicago, Washington, you know, all those combined in there together. The industry wide standard or average is about 16%. But I don't, it's not fair to compare DCTA to that because those are much bigger agencies and serving a lot more people, a lot more expenditures that go out there as well. Now, if you look at it on the modes, if you dial that down and look at individual modes, commuter rails about 5 to 8%, buses 5 to 10%, paratransit is about 1.4%. Those are averages across the industry. Again, including those big agencies that really are not a comparison to DCTA. And so, like I said, this is kind of the baseline of where we're going to start. One of the core things we are going to be proposing in the policy is to establish targets for each one of these modes. And so we're going to be looking at that, and then we're going to create a structure so that we come back to you as a board and report to you on a regular basis as to what is that, where we at, where we currently sitting with our fare data. So if we look at just an overall understanding of our fare products and what we currently offer out in the market, we have our a wide variety of things. I believe it was 47 different types of fares that we actually offer and that we sell. We got our local passes, a 31-day, a 7-day, AM, PM passes, day passes, annual passes, 10-back passes, semester passes for the fall, the spring, the summer. All these at the full value, and then there's a reduced fare that goes along with those as well. Then you have your regional passes in, you know, connection and coordination with DART and Trinity Metro. You have your university, your institutional fares that are out there, and then, you know, you're specialized in demand response type of things. And so part of the policy work, again, is going to be looking at and evaluating all of our different fare products that we have and determining whether these are still necessary or whether some of these can be consolidated or, you know, reduced in order to try to make things simpler for the administration of the system, but also for the experience of our riders. And then I'd like to get into kind of the fare policy outline and what we're looking at as far as the outline for the fare policy. And I want you to understand that this is kind of the starting point of what we've kind of developed and what could be in the fare policy, with the understanding that some of these areas may be consolidated together. There may be some additions, possible, subtractions out of there as well. I don't see that necessarily happening, but it certainly could. And so this outline was really developed by looking at other fare policies out there with agencies. I looked at 8, maybe 10 different agencies that currently have well-structured policies. And then I also looked at a high-level policy review that was given to the agency. I believe it was in 2023 by the Kittleson and Associates, that kind of outlaid a fare policy case study and some of the things that should be in the fare policy. So I'll cover these in sections instead of going through them, individually. Sections 1 through 5 are really the governance foundation piece of the policy. These 5 sections answer one, who has the authority, what services the policy covers, what objectives are we trying to achieve with the policy, what fare structures would be authorized under the policy, and how we are thinking about price relative to the cost. And kind of going back to the fare box recovery piece that we talked about. So basically in sections 1 through 5, it kind of who makes the decisions, who decides, and then, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to decide on? Sections 6 and 7, kind of the methodology and products piece. Section 6 establishes how fares are calculated. Are they cost-based? Are they distance-based? Are they zone-based? Or is there a hybrid approach depending on, what type of service, that sort of thing? And then Section 7 governs the full range of fare products and also addresses the cash collection approach across the system. As you heard Paul mention in the Frisco service and talking about cash, we're going to be addressing that in the policy as well. Section 8, this section covers both the discounts we are federally required to offer, and then any kind of discretionary type of programs that the board may choose to offer. And it's going to include the eligibility and then the eligibility criteria and then the verification process that has to go through for those. Moving on to the next slide, section 9 talks about our regional coordination. This is us coordinating with DART, Trinity Metro on all of our regional products and how does that work within the agency. Section 10 is our fare schedule adoption. And so what I see in this is that our policy, our fare policy and our fare schedule would be two separate documents, both adopted by the board. And the reason for that is the policy kind of sets the rules in which we go by. The schedule lists all the prices. And what that means is we can update the fares, we can update the schedule without actually having to go back and rewrite the policy itself. And then also, as we move forward with any contracted services, that will have separate fare schedules, and that will be addressed separately as well outside of the policy. So all those pieces the board will approve, but I could see them being individual pieces that go into that. Section 12 is the public notice piece. Any fare change would require public notice. in board approval. And so section 12 will mention that. Section 13 is performance monitoring. Basically, it turns all the data that we showed you today into something that kind of a formal obligation requiring us as a team to come and report back to you as a board on a regular basis. And then sections 14 and 15. 14 just covers the Texas Transportation Code obligations, FTA requirements, Title VI, equity analysis, ADA compliance, all the things that are required for federal grant recipients will be discussed in that section. And then section 15 just sets the review cycle, and then, establishes the board's authority to amend the policy at any time. And so, like I mentioned, that's kind of the outline that we have initially put together for the policy. And as we continue to develop it, I see it being a little flexible and fluid and moving over time. But this kind of gives you an idea in brevity as to what is actually going to be in that policy. And so our next steps as we move forward, first of all, we are going to be identifying our peer agencies for comparison and best practice, and going back to the fare box recovery data that I presented, and being able to really dial into peer agencies to compare ourselves to. Agencies that look more like DCTA. We will be identifying opportunities to streamline or reduce the current fare products that we talked about, identifying fare box recovery targets by mode. After we start looking at and comparing ourselves and setting those targets and where we want to be. Again, identify opportunities to reduce cash collection on the system, and then obviously begin drafting the policy itself. And so with that, I will end with asking you as a board, kind of what your priorities are for a new fare policy as we move forward into this process. What is it that you guys would like to see developed into that fare policy, so that we make sure that what we bring to you guys is what you're looking for?
Or you looking for that today or?
Well,
Let's
if
go
you have
forward.
any answers, or if you want to stew on it and bring those back, absolutely.
No, I just want to say, I appreciate the effort you're putting into this. I think this is going to turn out to be a great product. I'm really curious as to what you're going to find in terms of who we compare to, because I know we're a bit of a unicorn. So I think that's going to be a key element. And I think the potential for the metrics that you're going to come out with here in the governance model is going to be really beneficial. So thank you.
I'll add some thoughts. I think that when I looked at the numbers, Go Zone, we have highest fare box recovery. And my thoughts is that's probably appropriate because it should be higher. It should be closer to 9 or 10%. That's we had like 8.9 or something like that. Yeah, 8.7. The other ones, I mean, maybe an average of those around 3% or so seems about. But see what the data looks like.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of giving you just thoughts. Discounts. Yeah, we should continue to do discounts for nonprofits. Probably not a discount all the way to zero. Because I kind of always feel that there's always someone should have some skin in the game. What that amount should be, I'm open to discussion because I'm not sure what it is either. But that's just my personal feeling is that it should be something. I'll stop there.
I would agree with that. Go with the adage of you have something you're doing well, you don't give it away for free. So I agree with that.
I have a few thoughts. One, I think the part about the regional fair coordination is gonna be very important. And that it should be. I would like to see everything, we've talked about things being seamless, that's been the word that has been used many times. Not just across our network, but, connecting with other networks as well. Just as simple as we can possibly make it. I think that's super important for people to, understand how to navigate the system and what it's going to cost them to do so is very, very important. As far as when we were talking about comparative, how we're comparing our agency total cost recovery with other agencies, I don't know how many people are doing things of, I know other agencies do have something similar to Go Zone, but is it as much of their service as what ours is? So, I don't know. When we're talking about the cost recovery by mode, I think that's important to drill down into, kind of taking Go Zone out of the equation. But I also, as far as looking at if we're going to set benchmarks for different modes and what the cost recovery for those modes would be, I think there's two components to that. One is what each passenger pays, and the other is how many passengers we have. So we can drive our cost recovery up by getting more people on the bus, which, is the goal there, obviously, right? So without having to raise the price. And then, of course, sometimes you raise the price and ridership drops a little bit because now you've kind of, priced some people out of the system. So just looking at how we can make sure that, when I see a 3.8%, I think you said 5% was the average for bus, somewhere in that range. My first thought is not, oh, well, our fares are too low. My first thought is we need more people on the bus.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Those are my thoughts on that.
And Christian, well said.
Good.
Well said. And I think that for me, regionalization and regional fare coordination is probably key. But also, if we're looking at calculating fair pricing and cost considerations, I think we have to have a flexible policy that allows for, potential. In number 8, you looked at reduced fare and discount programs. So we look at different ways to address certain areas of our response to have flexibility to look at reduced and discount programs.
Go ahead, Pat.
Two questions and more process relating, kind of going back to that third bullet on public concerns. Is there a requirement that we put out this policy for public review? And is there legal review going to occur?
So it's a great question, and I think we're gonna do some real research on that. Right now, our Title VI policy says Title VI, obviously access to disadvantaged communities, all that sort of stuff. Says that an FTA policy says that because we're an agency that operates a low number of vehicles, that we're not required. However, our Title VI policy says we may go out for public comment. I think in the case of this fare, if we're going to modify the fare, I think it would behoove us to have a public engagement process. With regard to the establishment of a policy, we could also consider that. But I would note that this isn't a policy change because we're really working from not much of a policy currently. And so we're working from what is our current fare structure and then trying to codify that and then thinking about changing the policy. So I think if we're going to err, we should err on the side of public engagement and try to balance continuing to make progress with getting the right amount of input, recognizing that there's some things we're exempted from because of our size. Does that make sense?
Sure.
For me, my priorities would be a simple fare system. So like you said, maybe looking at consolidating ones that make sense to consolidate, continuing discounts for people in certain populations to ensure they still have access to it. And then reducing the cost of fare collection if there's opportunity for that, because I know it costs money to collect money, right? And then I would want us, I think, to avoid distance based for fixed route. I'm good with it for Go Zone. I think that makes sense because it affects how it's being used and whether people are using Go Zone versus bus. But for fixed route, I would want to avoid distance based fares just because that can complicate things for the user. They may not understand how much the trip is really going to cost them. So those would be my top priorities at this point.
City of Frisco and some of the things that I worked at, like the bookstore and so on, so went cashless last year. And which is all well and good, but the most complaints I get is, where did that come from? Why is that a convenience fee for me? Or things of that nature. And when you consider a low price book of $2 and somebody gets hit with a quarter, they pay attention to it. And I'm thinking along the same lines of the $3 ride on Go Zone. People say, well, it only took 2 rides. How does it cost me $1 more than I explained?
Good question. If there are credit card charges associated with using, even today on our current system, those credit card charges are netted from our fare collection, and that's a conversation that we're ongoing with VIA as well. So the customer sees only the fare that's published on the sign. We have to, in doing our calculations, understand on the back end, the credit card processing fees have to be covered.
Yeah, City of Louisville just went through this. I have zero interest in funding people's miles or their discounts or whatever they're putting on their card. Those fees, it's nonsense. Cost the City of Louisville almost $700,000 so that people can process their bills and get points back for whatever game they're playing. And all the cards do it, so I get it. But if you want points, you pay for your points. We don't pay for your points, in my opinion. So if there's any way to maneuver around that, I think that'd be great. Louisville's looking at it from a convenience fee perspective, is how we're addressing that. I've had great conversations regarding cash and cash recovery, and then the cost of processing cash. And there's a system there where it costs us money to collect coins, and that's not necessarily the most efficient way to move people. So if that's going to be in contention with my belief that what's the most effective deployment of capital, that may not be it. I was in DC last week, and that system was quick. It was easy. It took money out. It was Disney. It took money out of my pocket so fast. It was Disney. So the systems are there. They're available. I think we've got them coming into our buses. So I get it. There is a tiny percentage of the world that does not have a smartphone. It's less than 3%. But I think those people would be caught up in a program that would be handled either through United Way or some other fare option. So those would be the things that I would be looking at.
Yeah, and tap to pay and those sorts of technologies are certainly on the radar. And the first step, though, in getting this policy done is you need this in order to be able to program that system to work the way that it's supposed to. So got to get a demo of a live system at a conference I was at, and yeah, it's pretty cool on and off. So
All great things that we'll certainly build into and consider as we were moving forward with the development of the process or the policy. Just one thought on the cashless. Overall, if you look at the cash that we collected or Gilmore, you made a comment of 3% of the population. Our cash collections overall was about 2.7%. So
Yeah.
it fits right in line.
It's right in there.
With that, so. Any other questions or comments as far as the policy development goes?
Derek, I appreciate you jumping in with both feet into this whole thing. He's done a lot of research and gained a lot of understanding very quickly so we can get this policy underway and move on with making our system better. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited about the regional conversations that Paul's having with the other two agencies. I think that's important. So awesome. Thank you, sir. Next up, informational reports in your packet. We have multiple reports. I'm not going to list them there in the agenda, but those are our safety, service, and ridership reports for February. Things are looking good. We have an update on state legislative and local government relations consulting services. We have an update on federal legislative consultant services. Since all of that stuff is coming. We have an update on a task order with Kimley Horn for 44,725 for lighting conditions assessments. And we also have a notice of upcoming procurement, classification, compensation, and total reward study. Any questions on any of those? All right. Hearing none. Board, do we have any future agenda items or requests that you all would like to see addressed, bubbled up? All right. Staff, anything that you've got for that?
Just one note, if you could flip the slide one more. Oh, we don't have the billboard slide up.
It's there. Let's go a couple more. There we go.
Sign of the times, we've got some live billboards out on I-35E, and as we see diesel at $5 a gallon and gas at $4.25, we've just reminded people that the A train's there to get them where they need and want to go, and we really care about their pocketbook, so jump on the A train.
I actually saw it on the way here.
All right.
It has never in my 10 years of owning that silly little Miata car that I drive around in has never cost me over $33. I paid $40 to fill that thing up.
I don't even want to hear it.
So,
Well,
yeah.
you can ride the train also.
Yeah. Pat,
So speaking of diesel, how's that affecting our budget for trains and buses?
Good question. Lisa, are you able to comment on that in real time?
'Cause that's like. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. We typically budget with a little bit of cushion. Certainly that cushion is going to get thin if prices keep in the place where they are, but good question.
yeah. All right. Yes,
Quick question, or comment, we have a regional transit tour next week.
we do have a region. Yep. So we'll slide right into reports of items on community interest. We have some great turnout from our Denton County contingency, is what I'm hearing. So the Transit Coalition in North Texas is putting this together with the help of all the transit agencies. So if you have not heard about that, please reach out to staff and they will help you get plugged into that. If you know of an elected or somebody that really should be involved with this, please double check or let me know and I have the master list of all the Denton County folks who've registered. So if there's somebody that you want to double check and say, hey, they really should be on this, let me know. I'll be happy to help. I think there's particular council members or other folks that you think it would open their eyes to what we do in the region. I think it's a great day, well spent. Other community interest? Any other items coming up for the cities? All right, with nothing there, we do not have any executive session. And what that means is that we have no other action to be taken on today's agenda. Therefore, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.
There is lunch in the kitchen if you all want to grab and go.